All right, everybody. This is part two of the of three parts on the lecture on the introduction to race. You should have answered questions 1 through 10 up to this point. I think actually 1 through 9, and then you'll be answering questions 10 through 20 from this point forward. Let's get right to it. Before we get to question number 10, this is a very important fact that everyone should know. And I've actually covered this a little bit in the previous lecture. Every person on Earth as of 2020, and that's about 7.7 billion people, we all share 99.9% the same DNA, the same genes. So that means that there's only a 0.1% variable. Doesn't mean it doesn't matter about your race, your ethnicity, your nation, your culture. We are all biologically the same. All right. It always astounds me how very few of my students understand sort of the evolution of the Homo sapiens species. Homo sapiens evolved predominantly out of Africa, Western Africa, going back about 300,000 years ago, and that's how old we are as a species. And as you can see on this map here, humans sort of migrated around the planet over the course of tens of thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years, until we get to this point in our human history of 2020. And it's really important to understand that humans continue to evolve, and the ideas that we have evolve. The biology that is made up of us evolve, and we will continue to evolve, and who knows what the next evolution of species is. But you need to understand scientifically this concept of human evolution, because as humans evolve, our ideas evolve, including race. All right, so question 10 is going to ask you to watch a video first. It's done by California Newsreel organization, and it's called Race, the Power of Illusion. So please pause the tape now. Watch the video. There's a hyperlink on the Microsoft Word document for question 10. Watch the video. And then come back here. So pause the tape now. All right, so we're back. I thought that was a really good video, and I hope you got something out of that. Here's something, another fact that I want everyone to understand before we go much further. There's really only one race, although society has constructed this idea of race being sort of like how you look. In my mind, I'd like to think of us as, one race, the human race. And it's not based on how you look, it's based on how you act. And if there's any sort of reminder about the fact that we're all in this together as one race, this virus outbreak is clearly an example that we're all in this together. We're all sharing this crisis together. All right, so one of the ideas that I want to make sure that everyone understands is this idea of race being a social construct. What is a social construct? A social construct is an idea that has been created and accepted by the people in a society. And there are plenty of examples that have happened over the course of human history of what a social construct is. Government is a social construct. Social class, marriage, organized religion, beauty, what is beauty, currency, femininity, masculinity, education, and race are all ideas that fundamentally have been constructed by humans and then accepted by the larger society. All right, that's really important. Here's an example of that as it relates to race. In ancient and medieval times, going back hundreds, thousands of years ago, it was really wealth, religion, language, and skills that classified people, not race. Race is a more modern idea. In fact, the word race didn't even exist until the 1600s, and historical evidence supports that. Race is a modern idea, and it really, really begins with Christopher Columbus. When Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492, he began this vicious cycle of the transatlantic slave trade. He becomes the first European to land in America and begin the practice of enslaving Native Americans first and shipping them back to Europe. Europeans then will take that idea, take their boats down to Western Africa, take a bunch of enslaved Africans, and then sell those slaves to North and South America. And that really begins right after the Christopher Columbus 1492 discovery of America. Specifically in the Americas, specific historical circumstances led to the world's first race-based slave system. And it's this period from roughly the 1620s all the way up to the 1860s when slavery is abolished in America, where we begin to see this massive flux of African slaves being sold here in not only the British colonies, but actually even more African slaves sold in South America and the Caribbean. And this is a map. This next slide really sort of illustrates that better. In fact, this is where you're going to need to pause the tape and answer a series of questions related to question 11 and using this map. I've published this map in your worksheet. You'll need to study this map carefully to answer all of the questions related for question number 11. So pause the tape now, answer the series of questions for question 11, and come back after you're done. All right. One other fact about the transatlantic slave trade that I want to make sure everyone understands is that for approximately this 300-year period, when the selling of African slaves was sort of normalized in both South and North America, it is through this period where we begin to see a clear racial distinction being made by white Europeans. The racial distinction and the idea that blacks, Africans, are inferior to whites. This idea is used to justify slavery and the idea of white supremacy, that whites are better than blacks. And this idea is perpetuated for 300 plus years. And society just doesn't shake that idea, just doesn't turn off the spigot automatically when that ends. We live with racial tensions today because of the historical record of letting this perpetuate for so many hundreds of years. And it will still take a long time, if ever, when racial bias and discrimination completely goes away, if it does at all. All right, so we're up to question 12 here, and I'm going to need you to pause the tape again here to watch this video, which is featured on question 12. Please pause the tape now and watch this really fascinating video by the PPS Digital Studio on the origin of race in the United States. So pause the tape now, watch the video, and then come back here to learn some more. All right, we're back. There's another idea other than social construct, the idea of race being a social construct, that I also want to make sure everyone understands. It's the idea of institutional racism. Race has been institutionalized since the introduction of African slavery, and I want to define what institutionalized means. Institutionalized means to establish something as the norm in an organization or culture. And as I just said previously, it became normal to take Africans from their home country in home continent in Africa and sell them as human slaves to a white population. That became normalized. And when you normalize that throughout all of the various institutions within society, government, and the economy, it then becomes institutionalized, it becomes normalized. How does a society institutionalize race? Well, through its institutions, both intentionally and unintentionally. Like sometimes we do it without even really clearly thinking about it. It just is, it's something that we do because it's been so normalized and traditionalized. Various institutions that have institutionalized race include education, housing, banking, the criminal justice system, government policies, employment, clubs, social groups, This continues to this day. The institutional racism didn't end when slavery ended. It didn't end after the civil rights movement. Institutionalized racism perpetuates even into the 21st century. All right? This next video that I want you to watch is a really interesting one. It features a Michael Jackson song that actually really does a good job to address this concept of institutional racism. It will also require you to answer question number 13. So please pause the tape now and watch this video, answer the question on the worksheet for question 13, and then come back. All right, so I thought that was a really interesting way to use a Michael Jackson song to better understand institutionalized racism. All right, so for the remaining part of this introduction on race, we're going to be covering some fundamental terms that are going to be used quite a bit throughout the course of this Perspectives on Race class. Stereotyping, prejudice, bias, discrimination, disenfranchising. I don't think we'll have time for privilege, but maybe we might get to that. The first one that I want to get into is stereotyping, and it's something that, again, has been normalized. We all do it. Whether we would like to believe it or not, all of us are guilty of stereotyping. Stereotyping dictionary definition is a widely held but fixed and oversimplified image or idea of a particular type of person, group, or thing. And I think the oversimplification is the real key word here. We'd like to generalize something, and when we generalize something, we end up sort of stereotyping it. I want you to watch another video to better understand stereotyping as it relates to international cultures. This video comes by way of a website called Condé Nast Traveler. What they did is they interviewed a whole bunch of people from various countries and asked them how they think the rest of the world stereotypes their nationalities and their nations and their cultures. Really entertaining video. It will also require you to answer question 14. So pause the tape now and then come back after having watched that video and answered question 14. Pause the tape now. All right, we're back. One more term that will become very, very important throughout this class is prejudice. Prejudice is a preconceived judgment or opinion about something or somebody. It is also an unfavorable opinion without just grounds or before sufficient knowledge. So if you're going to make a judgment on something before knowing all the facts and really understanding it, you are guilty of prejudice. That is just fundamentally what prejudice is. And we're all guilty of it, some more than others. I don't have any video to watch on prejudice here, but I want to make sure that everyone understands at least fundamentally the idea of prejudice, all right? All right, the next term is also important, bias. Bias is prejudice in favor of or against a thing, person, or group, and usually in a way to be considered unfair, all right? We all have biases, just like we all have guilty of stereotyping, we're all guilty of prejudice, we're also guilty of biases. There are different forms of biases. There is something known as explicit or conscious bias. These are attitudes and beliefs that we have about a person or a group on a conscious level, that we are clearly, we understand our bias and we're going to display our bias without apologizing for it. That is what's known as conscious bias. There is also something known as implicit or unconscious bias. These are attitudes or stereotypes that affect our understanding, our actions and decisions in an unconscious manner. We both have a conscious manner, which is our awake, alert, and we act on sort of what we know. And then there is unconscious bias, which is sort of this under the surface sort of thing that's sort of within our psyche. And sometimes we are biased without even knowing that we're biased, all right? So those are the two fundamental forms of bias that I want to make sure everyone understands. All right, so there is this really fascinating video that CNN did back in 2012, which is about the subconscious racial bias in children. And I think that you'll find this video really interesting. So again, this is going to be a place where you'll need to pause the tape. You'll need to watch the video. There's a link in your Microsoft Word document. Answer the question for question 15 after watching the video, and then come back. So pause the tape now. All right, there's another form of bias that is also really important, and at least for my students, I want to always emphasize the idea of making sure that the information that we expose ourselves to both on TV and online is true, and that it's not trying to just feed our confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is the tendency to interpret new evidence as confirmation of one's existing beliefs or theories. All right. This is another place where I'm going to ask you to watch a video. In this case, it's not a YouTube video. So the link I've also provided on the Microsoft Word document will require you to just simply click the link if you're online and watch this video that comes from that web page. It's fascinating, and it will require you to answer 3 questions related to question 16. So please pause the tape now, watch the video, answer the questions for question 16, and come back when you're done. All right, we're up to discrimination. And this is a word that I'm sure many of us have used, but again, very few of us understand sort of its fundamental definition. Its dictionary definition is this: discrimination is the unjust or prejudicial actions of different categories of people or things, especially on the grounds of race, ethnicity, age, or sex. All right? So discrimination is prejudice in action. All right, that's really, really important. I'm sure all of you have at some point seen the crash course videos. The one on prejudice and discrimination is awesome, which is the next video I'm going to ask you to watch. This is where you'll need to pause the tape, watch the video using the link from the Microsoft Word document, and then answer question number 17 after you've watched the video. Pause the tape now and come back. All right, so another video to watch, and I'm sorry to keep doing this, but I think you'll actually learn more from the diverse group of videos that I've highlighted here than me just continuing to lecture on. I hope you're enjoying getting a lot out of these videos. This next one is also going to require you to copy and paste the link, or just simply click on the link from the Microsoft Word document. This will also help you answer question 18, and the question there is: how has the United States government discriminated against immigrant groups? A very fascinating video. Of course, it's very timely and relevant given the Trump administration's seeming attack on especially Mexican or Central American people as they try to come into the United States. So the video here is entitled "The Racist History of Illegal Immigration." Please click on the link on the Microsoft Word document, watch that video, answer question number 18, and then come back afterwards. All right, so we're back. And our last concept, which we're going to tackle today, is the idea of, or in this video, is a concept known as disenfranchising. All right, when you disenfranchise something or somebody, you deprive someone of power, of their rights, of their privileges. A synonym for this is also sometimes referred to as marginalizing somebody. I have a video here that I want you to watch. It's a NBC News video that came out in 2018, right around election time. And it really does a really good job to illustrate this idea of disenfranchising a group of people as it relates to voting rights. So please watch the video. You'll need to pause the tape, watch the video, which is linked on the Microsoft Word document, answer question number 19, and then come back here. All right, so although this introduction to race has focused primarily on black people as it related to slavery, other groups, obviously, have been institutionalized, discriminated against, or disenfranchised throughout 243 years of American history. Ethnic groups have. Asian people. Back in World War II, we rounded up over close to 200,000 Japanese Americans during World War II and put them in concentration camps. Hispanic people continue to be a group that is a target for ethnic discrimination. Europeans have been attacked, not so much in the 20th and in the late 20th century, but in the early 20th century, groups like the Irish were heavily discriminated against in the early 1900s. Middle East immigrants, because of their Muslim faith, have also been targets of discrimination and disenfranchising. American Indians, let's never forget that American Indians were the original settlers of America, and it was really the white Europeans that came across the ocean and said, get out of the way, or keep moving west, we're going to take over this land. And American Indians represent a very small population of today's American population, but in very sort of a sad fashion, you know, the American Indians still remain one of the most disenfranchised people within America. Women, we're going to be getting into gender equality later on in this class, as well as sexual identity, but and the LGBT movement. But these two groups of people also have experienced huge discrimination and bias throughout the course of their history. All right, so we're up to question 20 here, and this one is going to require a paragraph response from you. And so I'm going to end the video here. I need you to watch part 3 in order to answer questions 21 through 27. Based on what you've learned thus far in this class, in these lectures, how has American society institutionalized, discriminated, or disenfranchised various races or groups throughout its 242-year history? I'm looking for you to sort of provide some sort of summation to everything you've learned thus far. All right, that ends this video. Please watch part 3 in order to finish up the 27 questions.